Dana brings in a private investigator and August brings in a former vineyard manager in order to help set up her dessert wine, Vanessa finds a new target and Rose finally gets some notable development. To begin, let's get through this whole blackmail situation. Quincy, who is Dana's frat brother, is brought on in order to investigate who might the blackmailer be. One possibility is Otis, who works at the vineyard but hasn't been promoted to the manager despite, Bridgette leaving and also Christian not being able to really do the job. There's a family that filed a malpractice suit against Reginald because of something he did during one of his surgeries. And lastly is a gentleman named Larry Samuels who seemingly was in a Ponzi scheme and Reginald exposed him or maybe kind of stopped it. It's not 100% clear what went on, it's just that's the three people on his list. And right now, as of the end of this episode, it seems that August doesn't think that it's Otis, but when it comes to the malpractice family and when it comes to Larry, there's still a possibility. Though, all things considered, take note that two of the possible suspects we have not even met, so there's always a chance that it could be anybody we already know, because it's Kings of Napa. For the second topic, we're going to go into Vanessa's mind in terms of her still trying to deal with Reginald having an affair. To begin, she looks into his, backtrack. She tries to look into his computer to find emails or any other type of documents because her mind's just racing about all that might have happened between Reginald and Melanie, but she can't guess his password. So instead, she goes to Melanie's house, gets into her home, uninvited, goes on to Melanie's computer and finds out that Melanie and Reginald went to the beach, despite Reginald making it seem that going to the beach wasn't his thing. So that's a bit of a mark when it comes to her. But when it gets worse is that she has to hide in a closet when Melanie gets home. And while she's hiding, she finds out that Yvette and Melanie are hanging out, despite Yvette trying to make it seem that she is very pro Vanessa and hasn't really been hanging out with Melanie. But it just keeps cascading from there. Unfortunately for Vanessa, she finds out that Yvette was very much in the know when it comes to Melanie's affair, and there's also the possibility that Reginald was using Yvette's place in order to get down with Melanie, and might even be the place where Bridgette was conceived. It's a lot for Vanessa, and because of that, she decides as soon as she gets home, it's time to move Yvette's stuff out, and while she doesn't go as far as she did with Bridgette and fire Yvette, she does make sure all her wigs, all her clothes, all her stuff is moved out of the king's mansion. Which leads to, unfortunately for Yvette, her living with Melanie, who doesn't have as much space, and to go from having possibly your own wing, your own room, or just a good amount of space to now sleeping on someone's couch. It's not a humbling situation for Yvette, it's an unacceptable situation for Yvette. So she tries to, as quick as possible, kind of like mend fences, but you've met Vanessa. I know Vanessa to a certain degree. So it don't work. If anything, it goes to a back and forth, which has Yvette try to show that she is trustworthy. And one of the ways she tries to show that is reiterating that she never told anybody about Vanessa wanting to abort Dana back in the day. Which, unfortunately for Dana, is something he hears, and that leads to him having a little bit of a meltdown. In the last topic, it's going to cover August trying to get the dessert wine off the ground, and because of him being in his feelings, Dana trying to shut that down. Now, to begin, I should probably note, one of the reasons why Dana wants to shut this down isn't just to take August down a notch and kind of prove she can't be the CEO, president, whatever her title is, but also because she decides to hire, I believe, the person who was Bridgette's predecessor, named Grace, and she's very expensive. She costs the company $5,000 a day just on her request, never mind how much August might be giving her for a salary. And this is expected to go on for at least 6 months to not just get the grapes, but then to make sure that the taste is good and all the other bits of how you make wine. Anyway, because of the cost that Grace is putting on a company, because Dana is increasingly getting agitated with August and not consulting him before she makes financial decisions, he decides to bring on a savant who's supposedly going to become very big in the wine world to compete with August. Grace doesn't like this because Grace is a legend in the industry, and to have some new kid kind of undermine her in a way by creating his own little wine thing, it's an issue. So, in order to handle the situation, based on the bylaws of the company, Dana and August have a competition to see which person can make the wine the family thinks is best. Which, because of the whole Bridgette situation, in terms of not just the lineage, in terms of, Reginald being a dad, but also because she was expected to be part of the decision making, she has to get brought in, and she is courted just as much as Vanessa is, as the vet is, as Christian is, and the only person who doesn't really get, wooed when it comes to the whole situation is Rose. That might have been a mistake on Dana's part. Why? Well, similar to Yvette when it comes to Melanie, Rose seems to be fraternizing with what can be seen as enemy, maybe, in terms of Rose decides she wants to go hang out with Bridgette a bit. In their conversations, Rose starts to open up and really kind of make a friendship, possibly taking the place of August. And in their conversation, we learn that Rose, when she was over in London, she was a novelist in the making who was working on something that was part novel, part memoir, and it was supposed to be about a bisexual woman, which she is, who's just trying to make it in London. And one of the things she notes to Bridgette is that in the process of getting with Dana and becoming part of his family, she kind of lost her voice a bit. For while working in PR, she does have to write things. It's not writing in a creative way, at least the kind of creativity that she wants to pursue. And then when it comes to the voting process, it seems that despite the way that Rose usually is in terms of being very gung-ho when it comes to her husband, supportive and all that, she decides during that competition to step out and support August's wine. And previous to that, she wasn't really considered a factor. The tiebreak was going to be Bridgette. But with her deciding to vote for August, that was it. August wins, and Dana, with already knowing that his mom wanted to abort him and now his wife not being on his side, he flips out a bit. He talks about Rose kind of like a dog in terms of bringing up how he found her while she was just spraying CK perfume at the mall. And, he really shows who he is when you're not on his side, and definitely, undisputably shows he is his mother's son. But Rose doesn't go back and forth with him or really make it seem like this is going to be an issue that she needs to really take account of. So whether or not this causes issues in a relationship down the line, it's hard to say as of now. Our first highlight when it comes to this episode is just that Vanessa and Yvette are so consistent. Vanessa is petty, malicious, and whether you are her sister, her niece, her sister-in-law, you will get that mouth, you will see that action. I mean, she's not putting hands on nobody, but she would definitely have someone put hands on your stuff and kick you out the house. Or make sure that the paperwork is done so that you're properly fired. And I still appreciate this. She is, I don't want to say someone you love to hate, but you definitely love to see what she's going to do next, and also who's going to piss her off next, because it's a cycle at this point. Everybody is pretty much on that list of who can get it. August was in the last episode. Yvette is in this episode. Melanie's going to probably be for this whole season, if not series. Reginald, if his ghosts pop up, she'll probably cuss him out too and tell him to go to hell. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Following that, of course, is Yvette, who, when it comes to Yvette, I definitely do think she kind of undercuts Vanessa when it comes to her maliciousness and anger, because she's just comical. And I'm talking like 90s Queens of Comedy kind of comical. And while it does in a way hurt the scenario, it doesn't necessarily hurt Vanessa, and it doesn't hurt her either. It's more of a thing where it kind of shifts the tone of the show, or at least the situation, where it's more like soap opera campy kind of issues instead of like more so leaning toward a serious drama. Which, all things considered, with the way that the Kings of Napa is written, the way a lot of performances are, it going a little bit campy wouldn't be that bad. Just as long as it doesn't go too far over where it's eventually more comedic and ridiculous than it being something that really explores the different issues that people are going through. For our second highlight, it's Rose, and it's mainly because she steps out of Dana's shadow. She established herself as someone who's bisexual, who wanted to become a novelist. And with Dana, granted in the worst way possible, cluing us in that she really was kind of working class and she was working at a mall, just spraying perfumes, trying to, make some money. It really brings you in to want to know more about her character. And then when you add in her relationship with Bridgette, since Yvette kind of got snipped when it comes to bridging Vanessa and Melanie, now you can kind of see Rose as taking on that position. Now, granted, Rose doesn't have the same power and influence that Yvette has in order to kind of bring the family together, but at the very least, with her, Rose, connecting with Bridgette, we can kind of get those two sneaking off to hang out, and maybe Bridgette talk about her new job at this winery she applied to. We can kind of get to see what Rose thinks about all that's going on between Dana, Vanessa, Yvette, and also August, and sort of get two outsiders with information about what's going on inside and get a different perspective. Never mind, it's not too often when it comes to OWN anyway that LGBTQ characters are really an essential part. Like, with Cream Sugar, yes, Nova is bisexual, but at the same time, I feel that more often than not, she's with a dude, and even when she's with women, it oftentimes goes really bad in ways that you don't get to enjoy them being cute together. Which isn't to say that Nova is any less bisexual, but it does feel that as much as they embrace and acknowledge that she's bisexual, they don't really want to make it seem like an equal playing field between the potential of relationships with women as it is with men. And granted, they're probably not going to do this with Kings of Napa either because, Rose is married to a man, but you never know. This show has enough drama already, so can you not imagine that Rose falls in love with Bridgette and they have something going on inside? I mean, generational patterns. Her father cheated on her aunt. So what's to say that Bridgette won't cause an affair with Rose I know I'm one of the first people to say that this show has too much drama, but low-key, I'm not against Rose having a little fling with Bridgette. Two dark-skinned, beautiful black women having a thing on a show like this. I can get behind it. The last highlight is going to be Dana, and that's mainly because he's about to get real petty. The way the episode ends, he decides to have Quincy, maybe as a side project or as a priority, look into August in order to get some information on her to take her down. And with that, you can see that the petty machine is rolling. And right now when it comes to Vanessa, her pettiness, her malice is definitely mostly a one-person job. Yes, she has people work for her in order to move Yvette's stuff out. When it comes to handling Bridgette, she got August to kind of co-sign. But when it comes to Dana, he has money that he would definitely use in order to take down August. And a part of me even thinks when it comes to the company, he's not against a Ferric war in order to show that August could not handle the responsibility. And lest we forget, when it comes to people with businesses, Yvette has a side business or maybe a good business on her own when it comes to the wig thing, but August's money and all that she is tied to the winery. Vanessa's money and all that she is tied to the winery. Christian and all that he is tied to the winery. Dana is the only one outside of Yvette who's diversifying their portfolio, so if the winery actually did go down, he could still make it. As we saw in the first episode, he's into some type of tech clothing try-on thing, so that could easily kick off and he could say, screw all you guys and underestimating me, undervaluing me, I'm going off on my own. And all things considered, it really does make you wonder when it comes to the Kings of Napa and when it comes to King's Wine, how far is Dana gonna go in order to prove that he should be CEO, and will he be willing to destroy the company in order to prove a point? So on the fence, which honestly I'm sort of leaning toward it being a low point, it's just Kelvin and August, and I just can't get behind that relationship. As I think I noted in the last episode, one, he says he's separated. That dude could still be smashing his wife. Two, I think he has kids, right? And with that, I don't see August as a stepmom type. She seemed like the type who wants most of the time and attention, but I could be wrong. But on top of that, there's just no chemistry. There's written history in terms of them being together in high school, possibly being each other's first or whatever, but when they look at each other, when they're spending time together, I don't get into it. And I'm one of those people who likes a good romantic comedy, romances, whatever, but this does nothing for me. If anything, when August got called about that blackmailer situation because he wanted his money even though he just got paid, I was happy that he ruined that little date because I was ready for them to move on. So with that said, I'm hoping that this relationship is short-lived and that because this is Kings of Napa, there's some type of drama that blows up that relationship, but watch this be the one thing that doesn't get dramatic.